Good afternoon, everyone. I know folks will be joining us for the next couple of minutes or so, but I'm Michaela Buchanan, the Director of Early Learning and Literacy with the Florida Chamber Foundation. We're so excited to have you. Thanks for joining us on a Wednesday afternoon, rescheduled after the storm. This conversation today is about Florida's new child care tax credit. Our Connect for Kids webinar is the first in the series, so stay tuned for more timely, relevant, and actionable webinars coming to your inbox in the future after this one. So a bit of housekeeping just before we get started. You'll see the chat feature below. Feel free, tell us who you are, where you're from. We'd love to get you guys connected with one another. As you have questions, as we get into some of the more technical aspects of the webinar, we're going to use the Q&A feature. So we will elevate your questions as we see them. And if we don't get to all of them today, we will follow up in an email. So no worries there. We are also recording today's conversation, so in addition to following up on questions, we'll send that recording link out with all of the resources shared, so no need to scribble notes or anything like that. I will introduce our special guest in a couple of minutes, but I did want to take a moment just to share briefly why we're here today and what's the Florida Chamber and the Florida Chamber Foundation doing talking about the child care tax credit in the first place. So you may know that the Florida Chamber Foundation is the research arm of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and we are future focused in our research. We specifically look ahead to 2030, and our research is done through the lens of our Florida 2030 Blueprint, which outlines 39 goals that we believe are crucial to securing Florida's future. So that overarching goal is to grow Florida to be a top 10 global economy by 2030. That seems pretty far out there, but it's actually not unattainable. We're actually the 16th largest economy right now. So we're larger than Saudi Arabia, but not quite up to Spain. So we know that we're growing rapidly. And so there's some important context, for us as we think about our 2030 goals. We're expecting 2.8 million net new residents to our state. And yeah, that means more traffic and more houses, but it also means we need to create 1.37 million new jobs. We're going to have 40 million more annual visitors and 2.5 more drivers on our roads. So we're going to look ahead to 2030 because we know that what is coming helps us prepare now for future needs like our infrastructure, our workforce training, and today's topic, which is childcare. So when experts helped us put the plan together, we came up with 6 pillars and that 2030 blueprint that I just showed. And early learning lives under our talent education pillar. We know that that's not a silver bullet, but we do believe that if we can fix early learning, we can fix 1,000 other things. And Mark Wilson, our president and CEO, he has said that to me time and time again. So I'm repeating it to you. This is third grade reading scores, high school graduation. We're talking about improving incarceration rates and breaking cycles of poverty through early learning. But we also think about early learning as a 2-generation workforce issue, meaning that early learning is not just the foundation for which our children grow and learn. We know that 80% of the brain is developed by 3 and 90% by 5. But it's also about improving access, to our folks who are our employees and maybe our future employees. Working parents have a lot of issues as it relates to childcare access and affordability. And so to retain talent, we need to make sure that we are with their childcare concerns, or we run the risk of losing them. So next slide. We're actually facing a talent and a skills gap in our state, so less people are looking for work than there are open jobs, and that's not even necessarily folks who are qualified for the jobs. So, as we talk about talent pathways and what we're doing in post-secondary, we also need to talk about, what I was just explaining, retaining employees and being able to compete with talent. So about 11 months ago, I think, we did a groundbreaking study, and fortunately, the legislature did something about it, and that is the impact of childcare on jobs in our economy. So 6 months before we released this report, our untapped potential report, it found that 150,000 adults with kids under the age of 6 had quit their jobs because of childcare, and half of them said that they'd be out for a year or more. So as we face that workforce and talent shortage and maybe misalignment in parts of our state, we have 150,000 folks who might be looking for work today if childcare wasn't such a problem. So we found childcare was the #1 reason why they were quitting their jobs or maybe not completing their education programs. And this results in about a $5.4 billion loss annually in our economy. as employee absenteeism happens. We have the turnover costs of replacing employees when they quit that job or they have a leave of absence, and also those unrealized tax revenues. So we're really excited that the legislator passed the child care tax credit. And here you can see we created a little guide, which of course is like a 101. And today is a 201 as we have Representative Fiona McFarland with us to explain where this, all came from as she sponsored the original legislation. And then Jennifer Ensley with the Department of Revenue's technical components of taking advantage of this tax credit. So you can scan the QR code if you want to get our guide, and more to come on that. So I told you who was going to be with us, and now I'm going to turn it over to Representative McFarland for some great insights on where this came from and her passion. So Representative McFarland.
Michaela, you teed me up perfectly. Thank you for that great intro. So I am a state representative. I represent Sarasota up in the House, but I'm a mom. I was first elected in 2020, and that's the same year that I had my first kid. And I now have 4, so I've had many children in a short amount of time. And while the chamber was doing all of this work, I was one of those parents who was experiencing it. So, I told you I got elected in 2020, and I was so excited, beautiful baby boy. Yes, it was COVID. The world was turned upside down. But then I was ready to go back to work, and I couldn't find childcare. Now, I live in Sarasota. We are, a mid to large size county. The city of Sarasota itself is booming, whether it's with young families or our economy. And so, I felt like I was in a pretty good place to expect there to be childcare coverage. And I made my little Excel spreadsheet of local providers that were in a commutable distance. And I called around, and nowhere had openings for infants at the time. Infant care is very difficult to find places for. I see we have a lot of Early Learning Coalition providers on the call, so you guys totally understand this. But infant care is really difficult because it's the most expensive care to provide. Just because the requirements for student to teacher ratios are so stringent for those small babies. Anyways, here I am. Now I'm elected, I'm a lawmaker, and I'm finding this structural problem where I cannot find childcare. We eventually got off a waiting list. Don't worry, I'm okay now. But it was very difficult for me to find a place. And now I've said nothing of affordability yet, right? Once we made it off of our 5 different wait lists, which, by the way, we had to, fork over like $100 to $200 to get on each of these wait lists. Then I was shocked at how high the tuition rates were. I think our parents used to say they didn't want to have more children because they were worried about being able to pay college tuition. Well, now we're worried about having children in the first place because we can't pay for childcare. And by the way, we're having children when we, as parents, are at our hopefully lowest potential earnings point in our life, right? Anyways, I am a lawmaker. I am experiencing a problem as a parent, and so I decided to do something about it. So it's taken me 3 years. Starting in 2021, I filed a bill for an employer childcare tax credit. Thankfully, sort of in parallel, the chamber is doing all of this great work research. And when we finally partnered up, this is when we've been able to get the bill across the finish line here. And let me tell you what I'm envisioning, right? When we look at the childcare environment, I am not telling you that I am solving all problems for all people. What I was focused on were families that looked like mine, were working parents, had small children, and between the ages of 0 and 5, when school districts kick in, were struggling with what to do with these precious baby children during work hours so they could get back to the workplace, whether because they needed to earn an income or because they wanted to earn it. It doesn't matter. That's the group that I was focused on. And I believe we've got school readiness for those who are at the low end of the income level. But for working parents who are above that school readiness income threshold, we're on our own, right? There are no scholarships for childcare. There are bright futures for childcare. We're on our own. And at the same time, I looked around the state, and we're between a 2% and a 3% unemployment rate. And every employer in my area had had vacancies. We're looking for employees. And I thought to myself, I am a mom who wants to get to work. The Florida House actually offers childcare. When we go up to Tallahassee, there's a Capitol daycare room for lawmakers. And I thought, this is brilliant. Why don't I talk to my employers about whether this is something they want to offer? So I surveyed my local employers here in Sarasota. The chamber helped me with this. And employers wanted to provide anything they could to their employees that would help them return to the workplace after having children and stay in the workplace with those small children. And they were all about it. I talked to some of my employers in the area. We have two that I want to highlight. Our hospital, Sarasota Memorial Hospital, and PGT Windows, a manufacturing company. They have both decided to build on-site childcare. And so I talked to their HR officers and I said, and then their chief financial officers, and I said, what made you make that decision? Right? It wasn't because there was some tax handout there. What made you want to make that decision? And they said, because it helped our employees. It would help us keep our employees. And, with covering shift work, the market wasn't meeting our needs, so we just built our own. And I worked with them on what would have sweetened the deal to bring them to the table earlier. And that's how we crafted this credit. I want to kick it over to Jennifer because I know many of you are curious about the nitty-gritty details, but at a high level, there are two options for employers. Option A is build your own childcare, right? Especially after COVID, I was hearing from a lot of employers who said, we have all this space. Whether it's because people are remote working now, or we have these huge conference rooms that we're not utilizing, and we have all this extra space. And I thought, well, great, why don't we put a childcare center in there? It doesn't have to be as robust as you see from, a preschool that you're accustomed to in your local community, but, maybe it could just provide infant care for those parents that have small children. So option A for the tax credit is if you're an employer and you want to build your own facility, you can claim a tax credit against 50% of that startup costs, whether that's building a new facility, retrofitting an existing one, whatever your startup costs are, you can claim 50% of that cost. Option B is on a go forward basis. Either you've built that childcare center, or conversely, you want to partner with an existing provider out in town to maybe reserve seats for your employees' children or grandchildren. I represent Sarasota after all. If you want to do that partnership with a local provider, or you're operating your own center, this is option B. You can get up to $300 per child or grandchild per month to defray those costs for your employees. I've heard from employers in my area that through the chamber, I've been talking to employers across the state, and many, many employers are curious about this. Some already had a project in flight. Others are just excited that they've been given a new, there's a new bullet point potentially they can put on their HR marketing slick that says $300 per month per child in childcare cost to frame it. I tell you what, I'm a millennial, but when I graduated college, employers were offering casual Fridays where we could wear t-shirts, or they have a ping pong table in the office. And that was what lured us to that company. Now I tell you, partner with me on childcare costs, and I will work way below my earning potential. I will stay at a company. Until my children are all in school, if it means they're helping me with childcare. I think that this is a really compelling way that employers can partner with their employees on facing this childcare market that is completely broken and upside down right now. And that's my hope, is that we infuse more supply of childcare into our Florida market by having the government partner with our employees to say this is something that is important to Floridians. I will turn it back over to Michaela now. But thank you all for being here. I know we've got a hurricane that's, we're still having reverberations from, and don't you know, there's another hurricane coming, or a potential hurricane coming our way. There's a lot going on, but I appreciate you guys all logging on today.
Thank you, Representative. We really appreciate that. And like you, we're very excited for the tax credit program to be available to business leaders, who are listening in today and will watch this recording. So I'm going, and there's a slide a little bit more about some of the options that Representative McFarland was talking about. And I want to go ahead and kick it over to Jennifer Inslee, who is with the Department of Revenue. She's going to tell us all of the things that you know, want to know about the program, and for what, again, she doesn't answer, please put in the Q&A and we will follow up with afterwards. So Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I thought what I would do is start sharing my screen so that everyone can, hopefully you can see that. And I wanted to go over some of the things that the department has been doing to prepare for launching this credit. And that way you could see some of the materials, you could read them for yourself, and then also kind of give you a overview and some of the technical aspects of the credit. So this is our homepage.
Jennifer, we can't see your screen yet. Would you mind trying?
Oh, no.
It's okay. You're fine. I just wanted to
Oh,
get.
sorry.
You're fine. Good. There it goes. All right.
Yep. New Zoomer here. So anyway, so this is the department's webpage. We recently issued a tax information publication. You can find that. So you come along in the quick links, go to the tax law library, and you can see we issued this child care tax credits program link. And so as we go through this, it kind of clue you into some of the aspects here. We launched the credit, thanks to Representative McFarland. And what we're doing here is you get a credit for one of three ways. Either, and basically it goes off the two ways that she said, establish an eligible child care facility for your employees, and that would be your startup costs, up to 50% of your startup costs. You then once you have that eligible child care facility, you operate it monthly for your employees, and that's your $300 per child per month. And then also you can pay a third-party eligible child care facility in the name and for the benefit of an employee, also $300 per child per month. I do want to stress or, you know, kind of set up some expectations here. This is a non-refundable credit, and it's available against your tax liability if you're paying corporate income tax, one of the excise taxes on liquor, wine, and malt beverages. This is the alcoholic beverage excise tax set up by Department of Business and Professional Regulation. Gas and oil production tax, insurance premium tax, or if you're a direct pay permit holder and you accrue your own use tax. Within the tip, there's a link to the multi-tax credits page, and we're going to use that link so I can show you the web pages that we have set up for the child care tax credits program. Also within the tip, we have a link to the paper form, and we'll go over that too. And that'll kind of give you some insight into the questions that we would ask if you apply online. So I'm going to click on this link here. And this is the multi-tax credits page. You can see that child care tax credits is the first credit here. Again, this is going to list the taxes that you can take the credit against. CIT, the excise taxes on liquor, wine, and malt beverages, gas and oil production, insurance premium tax, and the use tax due under a direct pay permit. There's a link here. And we've got a whole page on the child care tax credit program. We've gone over this part before. You've got some references here. But under these different accordions, it's going to give you all kinds of detailed information about the credit. Applying for tax credit allocation, this is going to pass you off into our online link. There you can create a user profile and apply online. There are other credits out there too, but we'll focus on our child care tax credits. If you're required to file and pay electronically, you're required to use the multi-tax credits online application, with the exception of 2 or more businesses can join together and establish an eligible child care facility. And if they're going to do that, then we need them to file a paper form. But otherwise, individuals, if you're liable for one of these taxes, then you can apply for and earn a credit against the tax by doing this. Here we give you some of the information that you'll need to gather before you hit the online application. We need you to be able to enter your federal employee ID number, the average number of employees employed during the taxable or fiscal year for which you're applying. And if you file corporate income tax under a parent company name, we need you to gather the parent company FEIN. For establishing an eligible child care facility, for startup costs, you also will need to complete a statement, the facility state eligible child care facility statement. This is a separate form paper-wise. If you're in the online application, it'll just be a required attachment. It'll automatically attach. And you'll also want to attach your proposal for establishing an eligible child care facility. With this credit, you can apply prospectively. You don't have to have done all the things to earn that credit. What you're applying for is a reserve of the child care tax credit cap. The credit cap is $5 million per year, which sounds like a lot, but then you're, among different companies that can be used up fairly quickly. So we understand that people are going to want to apply as soon as they can apply. They may not have necessarily earned the credit yet. But you're going to want to, you have to attach a proposal, and that just means, what kind of costs you're going to incur, what we can expect, whether you're going to be licensed or non-licensed. And those type of questions, or the licensing or non-licensing, is governed by Department of Children and Families. We want to know how many, or when's your actual or expected operation date of the child care facility. You may already have a child care facility started. In that case, if it was started before January 1st of 2024, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get startup costs because your startup costs were incurred before the program began, but you would be certainly eligible for the operating an eligible child care facility. How many children are expected to be enrolled in your child care facility, and the amount or actual expected startup costs for your child care facility. If you're got an eligible child care facility, again, you can get a credit for operating an eligible child care facility, and that is up to $300 per child per month that is enrolled in your child care facility. You will also need to do the 556,000A. That form will be automatically attached if you apply online. Otherwise, you'll need to get it from our paper forms, and I'll show you where those are. We want to know the total number of months that the child care facility is expected to operate during the taxable or fiscal year, total number of eligible children that child care will be provided for. And like the representative said, this is either children or grandchildren of your employees. And the actual number of eligible children enrolled in the child care facility for which the credit's going to be earned. Lastly, This is if you don't have your own childcare facility, but you want to make payments in the name and for the benefit of your employees' children or grandchildren, and you're paying that to a third party. You can also get a credit for that. Again, it's $300 per child per month. And you will also need to provide certain questions, the number of eligible children for whom childcare payments are going to be made, and the estimated total amount of costs that you're defraying. So you can defray more than you're eligible to earn credit. We would want to know about that, but otherwise you're going to be limited to the $300 per child per month. But it's a great defray. Our applications for allocation of credit are going to be approved on a first come, first served basis. We've already gotten some applications in. We just launched a credit on October 1st. We've gotten some applications in. We'll be going through those soon. The department's going to send approval or denial notification to you if your organization is picking to defray or to do a credit against one of the alcoholic beverage excise taxes. Then the Department of Revenue has to receive permission from the Department of or the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, the Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco within that department, before we can approve or deny a credit. For claiming a tax credit, if you're approved for an allocation of credit, you can't actually take credit on your tax return until you've actually earned the credit. And by earning, that means you've actually incurred the startup costs for an eligible childcare facility, or you've incurred costs for operating an eligible childcare facility, or you've actually made the payments. So when you applied for your credit, it may have been prospectively, these are the things I intend to do. But before you can take credit on your return, you actually have to earn those. Okay. Rescinding a credit allocation is important because it helps other taxpayers. Let's say that you apply for an allocation of credit and you apply for $1 million, and then you figure out, oops, I'm not going to really need that much. You can rescind the part that you're not going to need and throw it back into the credit cap pot. And that way other taxpayers can utilize it. Remember, it's only $5 million for each fiscal year. Our fiscal year 24-25 just started for October 1. When we get to fiscal year 25-26, you can actually start applying January 2nd of 2025. So this was a little truncated just because it was launched and then the department had to, build the application and get ready for it. But another fiscal year is around the corner. Okay. I'm not sure if I should stop and take questions.
Yeah, so we have a couple of questions rolling into the chat and into the Q&A. First, I think I've seen two on the grandparent component. Can you just clarify for us? So the grandparent, do they have to be the legal guardian, or what's the circumstances in which the grandparent can be eligible for the $300?
I think it just says caretaker. I'd have to consult let's see. An eligible child is if the employee is the child or grandchild's caregiver as defined in section 3901. Section 3901 of the Florida statute. Let's see. Caregiver means parent, legal custodian, permanent guardian, adult household member, or other person responsible for a child's welfare.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that hopefully
That's
answers.
pretty liberal.
Yeah. Um, Another question that I see rolling in, well, let's actually go back to this one. So if you apply this year, the credit is just for the fiscal year that you're in, and then you would have to end for year 3, right?
I'm sorry, you were cutting
Yeah.
out.
So, oh, sorry. If you apply for this fiscal year, it's just
Mhm.
will only be applied for this year. If you want the credit for the second year, you have to do another application and the same thing for the third year, right?
Right, each one application per fiscal year.
Okay.
Or technically you could probably do, if there was still credit cap left and you had applied and then it's like, oh, I'm really gonna end up, you know, having more children in my childcare facility or wanting to pay for more children. You could probably apply again if the credit cap wasn't all utilized yet. But each fiscal year stands on its own. And when we get down to the individual taxes, depending on what tax you choose is how things are going to work, because you've got your different allocations, but then you're taking them against very different taxes. And so you've got some monthly taxes and you've got annual taxes. And so things can be, this is getting into the nitty gritty, things can be a little different.
And so your recommendation would be to definitely send you guys an email if there's any questions or concern as it relates to this.
Right. If you have any questions about whether you qualify or about your individual circumstance, you can always ask me that question and I can help guide you as to, whether or not you qualify or when do you want to apply that credit, which tax you can apply that credit again if you've got more than one tax that you're eligible for.
Okay. Well, thank you. We'll make sure we get your contact information out. Couple more questions, not to pepper you here, but the maximum credit, the maximum dollar amount that employers can take. Yes, 5 million is each year for everybody, but isn't there a cap depending on the size of the employer that folks can max? Yeah.
Yes, there is. So there's a pot, the credit cap of 5 million for everyone, but your maximums between each kind of credit being either the child care startup costs or the operating costs or paying for the benefit of your employee, those are going to be, the maximums for those are going to be determined by how many employees that you have during the fiscal or taxable year that you're applying for. So, and those are broken along the lines of 1 to 19 employees is one group. If you have 20 to 250 employees, and that's a separate group, and then more than 250 employees. And the maximums will vary depending on which type of credit that you're asking for. So establishment of an eligible childcare facility, and that's your startup cost. If you have 1 to 19 employees, your maximum credit that you can earn is $1 million. If you have 20 to 250 employees, your maximum credit is 500,000. And if you have more than 250 employees, the maximum credit you can earn for startup costs is $250,000.
And if I can highlight that quickly, so what Jennifer just said, the 3 bands of employer size, and what those startup costs are, but she also mentioned something earlier, which is that employers can group together to build a childcare facility. So that's really what I was going for with the 0 to 19 employee size. Like those are our small businesses. And I just have this vision of, like a strip mall, and all of those employers in the strip mall are probably going to have under 20 employees. And if they band together there's one of the units that comes vacant And they have a lot of employees that have small children. Like, wouldn't that be a dream if those employers in that mall all got together to build a new space for the benefit of their employees, and they can, you know, really use that $1 million cap in a really powerful way.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I know whenever the tax credit was being discussed, we talked a lot about small business being sort of the backbone. Not everyone is large enough to be able to maybe even do that on their own. So banding together is going to be really important if that's something that folks want to do, and they have the right liability. I want to clarify something. So we sort of talked about like there's kind of two options, but in option number two, right? So there's like the startup cost and then there's the cost of operating. So you can either pay somebody, you can contract, right? So if you can clarify, you can do direct payments. What does that look like? Can you do multiple facilities on behalf of your employees? Should is it one? And then, or can you bring somebody in because you already had space on site as the employer that you're now running and operating childcare at, and maybe you're contracting with somebody like KinderCare as an example.
Well, what it's going to depend on is for who owns the facility. So if you own the facility, you can get credit for the startup costs as long as the facility was launched after 1/1 of 2024. If you own that facility, you can get credit for operating the facility. It depends on how the contract works as to who owns the facility is the one that can get credit for operating the facility. Otherwise, if you don't own your facility and you're paying someone else for children that go to a facility that you don't own, then that's your for the benefit of type credit. Did that answer your question?
I hope so. If it didn't answer the question, please bring it back up in the chat. I want to make sure that's clear. There's no minimum, right, for the tax credit? That's a question. I didn't think so. I just want to make sure we answered that one. And then,
No.
then the only other one I see here right now that we haven't answered yet is this a dollar for dollar tax credit? I think the answer is yes.
Well, it's a dollar for dollar for what you've earned.
Yeah.
I mean, you get 50% of your startup costs, so you don't get 100% of your startup costs. But whatever credit that you earn, then you can take it against your tax liability on whichever tax you chose to take it against.
Okay.
I see a question about, does the credit apply to childcare owners who have employees with children? If you have one of the taxes that is one of the taxes that you can take the credit against, you can apply for that. So
so I've gotten this a lot, Jennifer. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that are like, oh, I want to provide childcare for my employees. Unfortunately, many of our nonprofits are not, fortunately, I suppose, nonprofits don't tend to pay any of these taxes you can claim the credit against.
Right, and that's
nonprofits that's paying like an alcohol and gas tax, perhaps. That's one that I could maybe see as possible for you to claim the benefit against. But for the most case, if you the employer or a nonprofit, this isn't going to be a sweet deal for you.
Right. I would picture that most of our applications are going to be against corporate income tax. But if you're not already, if you don't pay tax at the federal level, you're not going to be liable for the state income tax. And if you're not liable for the state income tax, this credit is not going to do you any good.
I see a couple questions, Michaela, if I could just jump in again. I see a couple questions about the type of childcare provider that needs to be involved in this arrangement. It just needs to be a licensed childcare provider. That can be a nonprofit provider. It can be a for-profit provider. And they do need to be licensed with DCF.
Or technically, they can also have a religious exemption. Or there's a certain non-licensing component, but again, that is the question for DCF to see
Yes,
if you qualify
I'll
for
give
that.
I'll give a
DCF has a
preview.
great website where they can look at some of the verbiage on there.
And I'll give a preview as to, Act 2 of this bill. Something that I was hearing from employers was, oh, I want to participate in this, but I don't know if I want to become a childcare operator. The regulatory burden scares me for whatever, all of these things that I'm sure you can imagine. Act 2 of this bill for me is to dive into what Jennifer mentioned with the religious-based care providers. They have a status called or license exempt. Excuse me. This exists on the books today. So if you've got a church out in town that has a preschool attached to it, many of them do, they are license exempt under DCF. And I want to give that same status to employers that are operating in their own childcare facilities. I told the story about how the Florida Capitol offers daycare. They're not a licensed facility. But because I'm commuting to work with my kids and I can pop up during lunch to check on my kids, I'm not hung up on the fact that they're not licensed and DCF doesn't come to, measure their door clearance 3 times a year. I'm not hung up on that. As a parent, I'm willing to accept more quote unquote risk because it's convenient to me and I can work and I can visit my child. So that's something I do want to extend to employers that are availing themselves of this credit in the future. I wasn't able to get it done in the past years, but we've mentioned that 5 million figure a couple times. I cannot end this call without please help me. I've bought us 3 years of this tax credit in the legislation we were able to pass. I bought us 3 years of $5 million per each of those 3 years. And my dream scenario is I head back up to Tallahassee for our session that begins in March. And Jennifer tells me that we're nearing like 4.5 million of using the entire credit. And I say, guys, we have to lift the ceiling. Like, let's make it $600 per month per employee kid. And let's raise the cap to $10 million because this is something that our employers appreciate and are taking advantage of, and it's helping families.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll continue to have a steady drumbeat and hope that business leaders today will spread the word so that we help you reach that goal. And we'll be there right beside you, cheering you on. So for the most part, I think that's the majority of the questions. I do want to raise 2. So if they rent a building, Jennifer, if they rent, they don't own, they're not going to qualify.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then the money cannot go directly to employees. It has to go to the
That's also correct.
provider of childcare on behalf of. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
And payment can go to multiple facilities. Yes. Yep. All right. And so if we didn't answer your question or, you have something burning that comes up between like 5 minutes after this ends, feel free to send us an email. Katie, can you please bring back up the slides for me?
Do I need to stop sharing?
Oh, no, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Okay. So I do want to thank folks again who took time with us this afternoon. Representative McFarland, we can't thank you enough. I don't even know if I should share, but I will anyway, since I already started. But, when we first reached out, they're like, oh, she might be on maternity leave. And I was like, oh, my goodness. So we're just so thankful that you took the time with us to be here. And Jennifer, I know we went back and forth on the webinar and then having to change. So thank you so much. I hope you got a lot out of today's conversation. We wanted to give you some more information than what was in the guide, but not overwhelm you with the nitty gritty. So again, if you do have questions, please reach out to us. I will send a follow-up email, make sure you have Jennifer's contact information and my own. And then of course, Representative McFarland's information is available as well online. I want to just take a second to say thank you to our Business Alliance for Early Learning Advisory Board members. If for not them and their support of all the early learning here at the Florida Chamber Foundation from birth to age 8. We know we wouldn't be having the webinar today. We wouldn't have Untapped Potential. So if you're interested in getting involved, not just with the tax credit, but maybe more broadly around what we can do as business community to unite around this issue, please reach out to me. That's my email. Again, you'll get it after the fact. And then if you haven't already, we'll be in Orlando later this month. We'll have the big Future of Florida Forum. We're going to talk about early education. We're going to talk about post-secondary. We're going to talk about everything in between. And we're also going to talk about all the other pillars of work that we're engaged in at the Florida Chamber of Commerce. So if you haven't registered already, please do. I know that space is limited. And then finally, want to stay up to date, you're going to get my email as a follow-up here, but from time to time, we'll send out relevant, timely, and sort of actionable things that, we want folks like you to know about and share all of the good work that's going on here and around the state. So we have promising practices, we've got research updates as well. So please feel free to scan the QR code, sign up to stay up to date with us. And I just want to thank you again for taking time. I hope you are safe after the storm, sending positive vibes to everybody as we think about new storms that we don't even want to think about yet. So please join me in thanking her and Representative McFarland again. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your afternoon and week. Take care.
Thank you.